Katrina was born in a small town, nestled between dense woods and rolling hills. It was a place where time seemed to slow down, where the houses were old, their paint peeling, and the streets were shrouded in an eerie quietness. But the most mysterious place of all was Hollow Creek, a dark, winding river that lay just beyond the town's borders. As a child, Katrina's mother had always warned her about the creek. "Never go near Hollow Creek," she would say, her voice trembling. "There's something in those waters, something you don't want to disturb." But as time passed and Katrina grew older, she couldn't help but feel drawn to it. Her mother's warnings lingered in her mind, but they became more of a curiosity than a caution. After her parents suddenly left town, leaving behind only memories and unanswered questions, Katrina decided it was time to return to the town where she had spent her childhood. The house she once called home was now an old, crumbling relic of the past, its windows boarded up, the garden overgrown with weeds. Everything was as she remembered, yet everything felt different. Hollow Creek, however, remained unchanged. Its waters still dark and cold, the same eerie whisper of the wind that always seemed to follow her when she was near it. One night, as the town slept, Katrina made a decision. She would go to Hollow Creek. There was something in the back of her mind, a force she couldn't resist, pulling her toward the very thing her mother had warned her about. She walked down the familiar path that led to the creek, the trees around her towering and blocking out the moonlight. When she reached the creek, the air grew colder, the sound of the water more distant. And then she heard it, whispers, faint at first like the rustling of leaves, but slowly growing louder, clearer. "Katrina, Katrina, come closer, we've been waiting." She froze. Her heart raced, her breath quickened. The voices, unmistakable, soft and coaxing, seemed to be coming from the water itself. As her eyes scanned the dark surface of the creek, she saw nothing but the faint reflection of the moon on the rippling water. But something was there. Something watching her. Something that wasn't human. Stepping closer, she felt a cold breeze brush past her, making the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. Then, as she looked down into the creek, the water seemed to swirl and churn, and out of the murky depths a face emerged. A pale, lifeless face staring directly at her. Its eyes were wide open, bloodshot, as if it had been waiting for her. Katrina stumbled back, her breath caught in her throat. Who are you?" she whispered, but no answer came. The face slowly sank back into the water, and the whispers continued. Come closer. Find the truth." Her pulse pounded in her ears as she backed away, the whispers now almost deafening. She turned to run, but her feet felt as though they were stuck to the ground. The air thickened and the water's surface rippled once more, and then she saw it. A figure standing by the edge of the creek, cloaked in darkness, its form almost indistinguishable from the night itself. It didn't move, didn't speak, but Katrina knew it was waiting for her. She turned and ran, the whispers following her, the image of the figure seared into her mind. But she knew one thing for sure now. There was something wrong with Hollow Creek. Something far darker than she could have ever imagined. The next morning, Katrina awoke with a start, her body drenched in sweat. Her heart still raced, as the image of the ghostly face and the dark figure lingered in her mind. She could hardly remember how she made it back home the night before, her feet moving on their own accord as the whispers echoed in her ears. She had to go back. She didn't know why, but something told her that the truth was hidden deep in Hollow Creek. Her curiosity, no, her need for answers, had become insatiable. She spent the day wandering the town, trying to shake off the dread that gripped her every time she thought of the creek. The townspeople seemed to avoid her gaze, as if they knew something they weren't willing to say. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Katrina found herself drawn back to the creek once again. This time she was determined. She wouldn't be frightened. She would confront whatever lay beneath the surface, whatever had been waiting for her all these years. The walk to Hollow Creek felt different now. The once familiar path now seemed to stretch on endlessly, the trees whispering among themselves. The air had become thick with tension, and Katrina could almost feel the weight of the town's history pressing down on her. When she arrived, the creek was just as it had been the night before, still, dark, and unnervingly quiet. But the whispers had stopped. There was only silence, an oppressive, suffocating silence. Katrina knelt at the water's edge and stared into the depths, She had to know. What had happened here? Why had her mother warned her for so long? The water was murky, the current sluggish, but then, as if on cue, the surface of the water began to ripple even though there was no wind. Her breath caught in her throat as the whispers returned, low and urgent. "Katrina, come, find us." Her hands trembled as she reached into the water. At first, nothing happened. Then a cold, clammy hand shot out from the depths, grasping her wrist. A scream escaped her lips as she tried to pull away, but the grip tightened. She could feel the coldness of the hand seeping into her skin, like ice spreading through her veins. Her heart pounded in her chest as she tried to break free, but it was as if something from below was pulling her deeper into the creek. Suddenly, the water seemed to surge, pulling her down with an unnatural force. She struggled, kicking and thrashing, but her body felt weightless, as if gravity itself had betrayed her. The whispers grew louder, filling her head with maddening urgency. "Katrina, you have to know. You have to see the truth." With one last desperate lunge, Katrina managed to free her arm from the water, pulling herself away from the creek's deadly grasp. Gasping for air, she stumbled backward, her eyes wide with terror. The whispers stopped. Everything was still. But as she stood there panting, she saw something else. Emerging from the darkness, a figure stood just beyond the edge of the water. It was tall, cloaked in shadows, its face hidden in the darkness. And then, a voice, cold and hollow, drifted toward her. "You've been chosen," it whispered. "You are the key. To unlock the truth, you must dive deeper. Only then will you understand why Hollow Creek never lets go." Katrina's heart hammered in her chest as the figure faded back into the shadows. But the words stayed with her, gnawing at her soul. What did it mean? Why her? The truth, whatever it was buried in the depths of the creek, and if she wanted to uncover it, she had to face her deepest fear. Over the next few days, Katrina's obsession with the creek grew stronger. She couldn't stop thinking about the figure, the whispers, the cold grip that had nearly pulled her under. She returned to the creek every night, hoping to uncover more, to find the key to the mystery that had been haunting her since childhood. But every time she tried, the same darkness, the same chilling silence greeted her. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, she sat by the creek, staring at the water. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth, and the night was alive with the sounds of distant animals. She closed her eyes, her mind racing with thoughts of the figure, the voices, the secrets buried beneath the water. That's when she heard it again, the whispering. But this time it wasn't coming from the creek. It was coming from behind her. Katrina whipped around, her breath catching in her throat. Standing there, just beyond the tree line, were the faces of people, no, souls, staring at her. Their eyes were hollow, their faces pale and gaunt, like they had been trapped here for centuries. They were the ones who had been whispering. "Help us," one of them pleaded. "We never escaped. We never made it out." Katrina's heart froze as she realized the truth. The people here, the souls trapped in this cursed town, were the victims of Hollow Creek. They had been drawn in just as she had, and now they were part of the darkness that ruled this place. "You have to find the one who cursed us," the spirit whispered. "Find him. Only then can we be freed." It was a scorching summer day when Emily arrived at the old lakeside cabin, a secluded retreat far from the bustling city. She had been invited by her childhood friend, Sarah, who had inherited the cabin from her grandparents. The promise of cool waters and the peace of nature sounded like the perfect escape from the chaos of urban life. But there was something strange about the cabin from the moment Emily arrived. Nestled deep in the woods, the cabin was aged and worn, its wooden walls darkened by years of sun and rain. The air was heavy, thick with humidity, and the scent of damp wood mixed with the ever-present aroma of pine trees. The lake shimmered in the distance, but even its surface seemed unnaturally still, like a mirror that hadn't been disturbed in years. "Come on, Em. It's just a weekend getaway," Sarah said with a grin, as if trying to convince herself more than her friend. "We've been talking about this for years," but Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She tried to ignore it. After all, it was supposed to be a fun, relaxing trip, right? As the day wore on, They spent their time unpacking, swimming, and exploring the surrounding woods. The sun beat down mercilessly, the heat pressing against their skin like a physical weight. The further Emily ventured into the woods, the more oppressive the heat became, almost suffocating. The trees, though lush, created an eerie silence, as if they were holding their breath. As evening approached, the air grew thicker, heavier. The buzzing of insects seemed louder than usual, their incessant hum filling the air. The night would soon fall, but instead of bringing the relief of cooler air, the temperature only seemed to rise. "Are you feeling this?" Emily asked, wiping the sweat from her forehead. "It's like the heat's getting worse." Sarah laughed, but there was a slight edge to her voice. "It's just summer, Em. It gets like this sometimes." But Emily wasn't convinced. As they sat on the porch, watching the sun set behind the trees, she felt the temperature climb higher still. The air around them felt charged, almost alive. The cabin creaked and groaned as if it was settling deeper into the earth. Or maybe it was something else, something older, more sinister. Then came the first whisper. It was so soft, Emily almost thought it was the wind rustling through the trees. But then it came again, clearer, closer. "Come closer." Emily stiffened, her skin crawling. She glanced at Sarah, but Sarah was lost in thought, her eyes fixed on the darkening woods. "Did you hear that?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hear what?" Sarah replied, but Emily noticed the slight quiver in her friend's voice. Before Emily could respond, the air grew colder, the temperature dropping so suddenly that her breath misted in front of her. The night sky had turned an unnatural shade of deep red, as though the sun had never fully set. The whisper came again, louder this time, almost as if it was right behind her. "Come closer." Suddenly the lights in the cabin flickered and went out. The darkness seemed to swallow everything, and the oppressive heat turned to an almost freezing chill in a matter of seconds. Emily stood up, her heart racing. She had to get inside. But before she could make a move, something caught her eye. There, just beyond the edge of the woods, in the dim light of the fading day, a figure stood watching them. It was tall, impossibly still, blending with the shadows. "Sarah," Emily started, but when she turned to her friend, she saw only fear on Sarah's face. "Do you see that?" Sarah's voice was trembling now. Emily nodded, but before she could say anything more, the figure moved. Not like a person walking, but more like it was gliding, sliding between the trees with unnatural speed. Emily's heart leapt into her throat. The air was thick with something ancient, something wrong. "Get inside." "Now," Emily commanded, her voice shaking. They both ran to the door, but as Emily reached for the handle, the whisper came again, closer than ever. "Leave this place before it's too late." Inside, the atmosphere of the cabin felt even more suffocating than it had outside. The walls seemed to close in on them, the floorboards groaning underfoot as if they were alive, reacting to their presence. Emily glanced around, but nothing felt safe, nothing felt familiar. Suddenly, a loud crash from upstairs startled them both. Sarah flinched and backed away from the staircase. "What was that?" "I don't know," Emily replied, her voice tight with fear. "Stay close." They crept upstairs, every step feeling like it was dragging them deeper into something they couldn't escape. The heat had returned, only now it was unbearable. It felt as though the walls themselves were radiating it, as if the cabin had absorbed the sun's energy throughout the day, and now, at night, was releasing it all at once. When they reached the top of the stairs, they saw the door to the attic slightly ajar, the same place Sarah had warned her never to go. "Sarah, what's in the attic?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Sarah's face went pale and she shook her head, the fear in her eyes unmistakable. "Nothing. Just old things. But..." Before Sarah could finish, the whisper came again, louder this time, as if it had broken free from the walls. Come up. Find what's hidden." Emily felt the pull. She knew they had to go up there. But something was terribly wrong. It wasn't just the heat. It was as if the house itself was a trap, slowly, inevitably drawing them in. The air in the cabin grew stifling as Emily and Sarah stood at the foot of the attic stairs, the whispering voices now almost deafening. "Come up. Find what's hidden, before it's too late." The words seemed to pulse in the very walls. an eerie rhythm that made Emily's skin crawl. Sarah stood frozen, her hand gripping the railing of the stairs. "I don't want to go up there," she whispered, her voice shaking. It's not safe, Emily. My grandparents, they were keeping something in that attic. Something they tried to hide. The heat was unbearable now, pressing down on them from all sides. Emily could hardly breathe, the thick air closing in around her. The attic door beckoned, almost alive, its dark, yawning opening promising answers, or death. "I need to know," Emily said, her voice a strained whisper. "We need to know what's happening here. We can't leave without understanding what's wrong." With a hesitant glance at Sarah, she took a step toward the stairs. She could feel the eyes of something ancient, something unseen, watching her, pushing her forward. She climbed the stairs, each step heavier than the last, the wood creaking beneath her feet. When she reached the top, Emily paused before the attic door. The whispering had grown silent, replaced by a low, deep hum that vibrated through her bones. Slowly, she turned the knob. The attic was like a tomb, the air thick with dust and decay. Cobwebs stretched across the rafters, and forgotten furniture lay covered in sheets, their shapes unsettling in the darkness. But in the far corner, something gleamed. A large old chest, its surface worn but intricately carved with strange symbols. Before Emily could approach it, Sarah's voice broke the silence. "That chest, my grandparents, they warned me about it. They said it was cursed." Emily ignored her, walking toward the chest as though drawn by an invisible force. She reached for the latch, but as her fingers touched the cold metal, the temperature in the room plummeted. Her breath came out in clouds and a cold, unnatural wind howled through the attic. She hesitated for a moment, but then the whispers returned, louder than ever. "Open it. Reveal the truth." With a deep breath, Emily opened the chest. Inside was a book, old and tattered, its pages yellowed with age. The book was thick, bound in something that looked like human skin. Its title was etched in faded gold letters, The Unseen Ones. Emily's hands trembled as she picked it up, flipping through the pages. What she read made her stomach turn. The book detailed ancient rituals, dark rituals meant to summon and bind spirits to the earth. But the most disturbing part was the story of a curse placed upon the land itself, a curse tied to the very lake outside, a curse that was awoken every summer during the hottest days, drawing the souls of the dead back into the world, trapped in the heat, trapped in the land. Emily's heart pounded in her chest. The ritual had gone wrong. The spirits had been bound to the land, to the cabin, to the heat that came with every summer. They had been waiting for someone like her, to break the curse, to release them, or to become part of it. Suddenly, the attic grew darker. The shadows twisted, and the temperature dropped even further, the cold seeping into Emily's bones. The spirits, the unseen ones, were angry. They didn't want to be freed, they wanted to claim her. The walls seemed to pulse with their wrath. The book slipped from Emily's hands, falling to the floor with a loud thud. The whispering grew louder, now a roar in her ears, drowning out everything else. "Leave. Leave this place. Or become one of us." But it was too late. Before Emily could react, the shadows lunged at her, their cold, grasping hands reaching for her, pulling her into the darkness. Sarah screamed, but her voice was drowned out by the cacophony of whispers. The last thing Emily saw was the face of an old woman, her eyes hollow and full of sorrow, as she was pulled beneath the floorboards. Months later, the cabin stood silent, abandoned. The heat of the summer had passed, but there was still something in the air, an oppressive weight that refused to lift. The lake was still, unnaturally calm, and the woods stood quiet. People spoke in hushed tones about the cabin, about the strange disappearances that had occurred over the years, always in the heat of summer. And every so often, when the summer sun was at its peak, the whispering could be heard in the wind, calling those who would listen. And those who ventured too close to the cabin, those who ignored the warnings, would never return.